Hello everyone, welcome to the Animal Biology course selection guide for first years. I'm Melissa and I'm going into my third year of Animal Biology.
And I'm Madison and I'm going into my third year of Animal Biology.
This is Apps on Air, and in this episode we're diving into everything you need to know about your first year. From what courses you'll take to how to find your footing both socially and academically. Whether you're excited, nervous, or both, we're here to help you start strong and make the most out of your journey from day one. First, we are going to be covering the general information for course selection this year, as there are a few rules that have changed.
Okay, so for this year, we are both applying for fall and winter, which is fall 2025 and winter 2026 course offerings at the University of Guelph, starting on Tuesday, June 17th, which means that you'll be applying for both fall and winter at the same time.
So fall 2025 and winter 2026 course selections will begin on June 23rd of 2025, and the windows will open based off of how many credits you have completed and or are enrolled in.
Now for those who think this is kind of confusing, it is. So for course selection for fall 2025, it will run until Friday, September 12th, 2025, and winter will be open until Friday, January 9th, 2026.
And then in terms of our first years here, who most likely have not completed any courses, your course selection will actually open in July. So they haven't figured out the exact dates yet, but it'll be July 9th, 10th, 11th, and 14th. And this is dependent on what program you're in. So once they have all those posted, the details will be posted on June 6th. So you'll know your exact day of when to apply. And it'll be based off of like completed and in progress credits. So for you guys, you'd have 0 completed or in progress credits. So without further ado, let's now dive into all of the courses you'll be taking for this year. Alrighty, so before we get into all of the courses, I did want to mention you will be taking 5 courses per semester, and each course is worth half a credit. So you're going to be taking 2.5 credits each semester. So for first year, your 8 out of your 10 courses are pretty much set for you, and then you can take 2 liberal education electives. You will need, by the time you graduate, you will need 4 courses or 2 full credits of liberal education electives. So in your first year, you'll be taking 2 of them. Now to jumpstart, we'll have our first each semester you'll have 4 courses that are mandatory you have to take, and then 1 course that is kind of optional.
Okay, let's jump into it. So the first course you're probably going to take or hear about if you're coming to University of Guelph for the first time is General Chemistry 1, which is known as Chem 1040. Now, let me preface by saying this, it is called Killer Chem, but let's talk about the outline of how it works. So this is what I believed was the most confusing part about coming into university, was trying to understand this course outline, because what it is you have your lab section and your lecture section. Your lecture section is where you're in class with about 500 people, depending on where you're placed. And then your lab section is a smaller group of individuals that is 20, give or take. I don't remember, apologies. But basically what it is you have your in-class section, which will depend on what day it will run. So every week you'll have classes, but your lab portion is bi-weekly. And there's a difference of you're in the first week or the second week of running, and you alternate your sections. Now, what you'll do is your basic experiments, we did a couple of titrations, we did a couple of data calculations, and the most important thing about those things, sig figs. Now, me going in, I don't know nothing about sig figs, if I'm being honest. I didn't use them that much in high school until we got here, but it's definitely something. What about you, Alyssa?
Yeah, so you're gonna have wet labs and dry labs. So your wet labs are the 3-hour lab sections that you'll have bi-weekly, and then you'll need to create a post-lab report. And the thing about this is a lot of the questions you actually don't show your work, you just put the final answer. They're it's an online little form that you have to fill out, and you just fill out your answer. And if you have the sig figs wrong, then you get 0 marks for that question. So one thing is important is know your sig figs. They're going to teach you at the beginning of the class, and you're going to think, oh, I already know this. But there are many different rules that were added in university that I didn't know about sig figs. I thought sig figs were originally just like the smallest number out of all the ones that you're using, but it is not, and dependent on whether you're like multiplying, dividing, using like logarithmics, all that fun stuff. Sig figs are definitely very prominent, and you need to make sure you know them before you do any of the post labs. I'm not going to lie to you, I remember going into my first lab and I think I got like almost every question right, but because my sig figs were wrong, I got about a 50% on that lab report. So they are very important. And then the weeks that you're not doing a wet lab, you're doing a dry lab, and essentially those are online. You're gonna like purchase a little lab manual from the bookstore, and it'll have like all the wet lab and dry lab information that you need. And the dry labs are essentially there'll be simulations online that you're working through, and then you'll have to, they can be tedious at times, but you'll have to work through them. And then there's like a little form on CourseLink. It's like a test where you enter in all the values that you received. So it is pretty tedious, but yeah, to break it down, you have your wet labs and your dry labs. They alternate weeks. Your wet labs, you'll have a post lab report after you like completed the 3-hour lab, and that is due like 1 week post your lab period, so you do have like a decent amount of time to finish it. And then your wet labs are usually due they're due that week, so it's usually due like on the Sunday 11:59, like after that week is completed. So yeah, and then there's also mastering chemistry assignments. Now these, I kind of wish I took them a little bit more seriously. There's 2 mastering chemistry assignments that you have to like complete each week. For us, I think there was like one that was due on the Thursday and one that was due on the Sunday, but it could change. Like, keep in mind, we did take these courses 2 years ago, so it's possible the format has changed slightly. But one thing I would recommend is make sure you actually do them. Don't just like search up the answers, because it can be pretty easy to do so. They are actually really good practice for the midterms and the finals, and you're going to see a lot of questions that are very like similar to like what you would see on the finals. So that's one thing. And like, we have pretty much a general rule of thumb is just because it's open book assessments still need to be studied for, and things can catch you off guard at the worst times. So yeah, and then in terms of like my opinion, you can share as well, but I found the midterms were not too bad. The good thing is they weren't like it was only like up to what you've learned, so there wasn't too much content to cover. We had 2 midterms in that case, and ours, one was online and one was like in person. And then I'm not gonna lie, for me, I found because the final was culminating, it was quite tough. It's very content heavy, and there's also like a lot of mathematics. So yeah, how did you feel about them?
I'm one of those people that will say Chem 1040 was probably the worst class I've ever done. Like, just because it's your introduction to university chemistry, like, at least in my high school, not name dropping, our chem background was not strong, so coming into university was really challenging going into the first midterm. Mm-hmm. So if you do really bad, don't worry, because I passed. And I'm still here, so yeah, that should say something.
We're still here.
Yeah, but the second midterm, you start to get the hang of it, and then the final is like, what are you doing now?
Yeah.
Like, it's intimidating because it's one of your first university finals. So don't be afraid if it doesn't necessarily go the way you want, because there's a lot of people in like our position now that will say that they didn't do good in Chem 1040, but they did better in futures. But I also want to mention that the exam portion is also big, but the lab portions are also really big. You need to pass, I believe it is 4 out of 5 labs to pass the course, or you get an automatic 0 in the course, because it is very heavily dependent on those and your marks, because that means it's for attendance. You need to attend, I believe, 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5?
You need to attend 4 out of 5 labs.
You need to attend all of your labs. You need to have all of the proper equipment, because they will kick you out if you do not have your proper goggles, your things. But that's stuff they'll explain to you once you go in. But yeah, Chem 1040 was my biggest roller coaster.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, like, yes, like, first year is definitely a big roller coaster, but like, don't get discouraged. Like, I've spoken to so many people, and like, as the years do go on, like, for me at least, like, my grades were probably like 10 to 15% higher. So first year, definitely they'll like sort of put you through the ringer, but like, just stay focused and like you'll adapt to like the pace of things, because you'll notice in university, like the pace of things, it gets a lot like faster, but you'll notice like even in your second semester you'll start to like get the, okay, I need to do things like a week ahead of time instead of like a few days ahead of time. It'll like, you know, there is more time in your day that is devoted to studying, and obviously now you're on your own, like you're either living on campus, some may be commuting, but like you're kind of on your own now, and your teachers in high school are not going to be as like lenient and like dependent on if you complete the assignment or not. At the end of the day, it's like now all on you, and you need to make sure you have like that responsibility to like get things done and not leave things to the last minute. I know it's easier said than done, but I promise you guys will get the grasp of things.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing about university is you used to be somebody in a class of 30 people where you mattered individually. And then when you come to university, it's like you and 500 people also want to do the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. So it could be intimidating, but trust me, you guys will be fine. Okay, with that, let's jump into our next class.
So our next course is Biology of Plants and Animals in Managed Ecosystems, and the course code is BIOL 1050. So when it's like a biology course, we usually short form it to the first four letters. So it's like BIOL 1050. And the way this course is kind of split up is it's actually split up into 4 different sections. So there like will be 4 different professors, and there's 2 plant and 2 animal sections. And you'll also have like weekly labs. Personally, I didn't find them too difficult. A lot of them were participant based. So as long as you like pay attention to, like, the TA will have like a brief introduction about what you're going to be doing, and then they're pretty, like, I would say pretty self like explanatory. As long as you follow, you shouldn't have too many difficulties. But yeah, in terms of the breakdown, there are 2 online midterms and 1 final, and how basically the midterms work is like the first section will be on the first midterm, the second section will be on the second midterm, and then your final, I believe, is just on the last 2 sections. Mm-hmm. So the good thing is it's not culminating, and you can kind of like focus on each section individually, which I found was pretty good. I really found, like, surprisingly, I thought I would like the animals, only the animal sections. Like when we started learning about plants, I was like, you know what, like I'm not that interested. But like as we got on, like the profs that taught were actually really engaging, and I actually really liked both sections, the plant and animal section of this course. So me personally, I thought this course was like one of my favorites in first semester. In terms of like the midterms and exams, I thought honestly all of them were pretty fair as long as you studied. And one thing that we recommend is falling behind in this course is not a good idea, because the final content can be pretty heavy, and it basically won't look good if you study. But as long as you kind of keep up with the course content, I would say obviously the 2 like online midterms are easier, and the final is a little bit harder because it is like basically half the course content into 1 test. But yeah, I don't know what you think, like how you thought about that course, but I thought it was pretty good.
No, I like that course. It was like your first introduction to what our major is about. It's like a little bit of the understanding the plants for the agricultural purposes and getting into what you came here for originally. Now with the labs, like me and my roommate, we had such a great TA that made our lab section really fun, because what did we do? We did the plant thing where we had to fertilize the plants. We had random debates about animals. Like our lab section was just really fun, and it was something to go to even though it was like a Friday early morning. That was not a great idea on our part, but it was really fun for the most part. And I really like, even though having 4 professors couldn't be like odd and intimidating, it was nice to get like different industry perspectives on those. Mm-hmm. Shout out Andy Robinson, because he taught up that portion of the course that I remember the most.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and the midterms and the final were basically fair. Like, I don't know, don't take our word for it because he might not do the same, but we had a professor for one of the sections release questions prior to the exam to like give us a gauge of what we were going to be doing on the final, and they were basically like almost dead on to what we saw on the final. So as long as you like understand the content, you should be fine. This course is not the end of the world.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, I guess that's all we have to say for this one, really.
Yeah.
Okay, for our next course, we have Elements of Calculus 1, which is Math 1080. Now, this basically is, if you took Calc in grade 12, this is mostly a review. You're focusing on things like natural logarithms, using like the trig functions in math, of course, and you're doing like the sine, the power rule, all of those laws and stuff like that. Derivative, big on derivatives. Nothing complicated, but derivatives. If you didn't take it in high school, you'll be fine because there's a lot of the professors here that are really good at teaching it. They do go out of their way to help you. And then we had tutorials. I think, was it once a week?
Yeah, I think they were like weekly like tutorials. I think like 3 of them, there was like an assessment, like each worth 5%. But they were like open book and you could like work on them with friends. And there would basically just be a set of questions, then you hand it in at the end of the seminar. I think the seminars were like an hour, something like that.
Yeah, they were horrible. We had 2 midterms and then we had the final. The first midterm was really simple. It was like a grade 12 review of your basic derivatives. And then, I don't know, what's the second midterm content?
Honestly, I think it was just like a continuation. Like, I remember the first midterm kind of being the first half of grade 12, and then the second midterm being the second half. Mm-hmm. And I thought the final, I don't know if we got, it's kind of, my memory's a little bit foggy, but I feel like that the final is when we started to add on a few other concepts that I hadn't have learned before. But the final for us was online. However, I did find the final was like the hardest out of all of the assessments. Like, I think that was the one that like decreased my grade a little bit. But yeah, other than that, I thought like the test, like it was probably one of my best grades. Now I am a little bit more math inclined, but like I greatly enjoyed the courses. I thought the prof was good. And I believe like the textbook too, I liked that he just gave it, like it was an online textbook, but he gave it like for free. So you didn't, like in first year, you might have to buy quite a few textbooks. And this one you didn't have to, so that was nice. I really liked this course all in all, and I don't think you should worry about it too much.
Yeah, and even if you don't get a great professor, the textbook is really helpful in getting you there because they give the practice, they give the answers, and the answers are pretty straightforward. Like they go step by step, and everything you need to know is on that paper. Now, I did struggle on the second midterm because they incorporated like natural logarithms and trig functions, which I didn't cover that much. But if you understand that and you take the time to properly understand it, then this course will not be something that will tank you.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think that's kind of much of it.
All right, so moving on to our next course, we have physics. So you're going to take one of 2 courses. You're either going to take fundamentals of physics, so that is PHYS or Phys 1300. So this is like the introductory course, and you're going to take this course if you have not taken grade 12 physics in high school. So that's the course you're going to take. It is pretty introductory. And then if you've taken grade 12 physics, you're going to take physics for life sciences, which is Phys 1080, so 1080. So this one is essentially you're kind of building on from what you've learned in grade 12. I definitely do not recommend, if you have not taken grade 12 physics, don't take physics 1080. There is not really any introductory. I do remember for this course, you're basically, the first like week or 2 is pretty much all the content that you learned in high school. So it is not very like introductory, and you will struggle if you have not taken physics in your life. So please make sure, I know a lot of like animal biologists that I know actually like took physics 1080 and then realized they were in the wrong course and had to drop out and then didn't have a spot and had to take it next year. So make sure, like this is very important, that you're taking Phys 1300 if you haven't taken physics before, and Phys 1080 if you've taken grade 12 physics. Okay, so moving on, both of these courses are generally the same layout. So you're going to have 5 quizzes, each worth 8%, and they are in person. You're going to go to this little room. You have 20 minutes to complete the quiz. There's usually, like honestly, one quiz. I only had like 2 questions. I think the most you'll have is like 5. And you're essentially going to fill out the papers, and then you're going to like hand it in. There's 2 kind of like columns on where to hand your paper. You can either wait for the TA to mark it with you, or you can just put it in like the other file, which they'll mark it once they have a chance, but you're not present for the mark. I recommend please stay to like watch your TA mark your test. A lot of the times they'll like, either they're really good, if you get a question wrong, they're really good at explaining where you went wrong. And also another thing too, if you kind of explain how you went with a question, they can give you part marks. So I highly recommend like stay to watch your TAs like mark your test. Like all of the ones that I've had are like honestly great, and I've like learned a lot from them, and the things that I have learned came up on like the final exam. So highly recommend stay for the TA quizzes.
Please.
It's only like an extra 20 minutes of your time, I promise you. And then you'll also have pre-quizzes or pre-tests. They're usually like on the Tuesday of every other week. It could change, but essentially they're just like I think around the same time, like a 20-minute quiz. There's like 5 questions, and you only need 3 out of each quiz is worth 1%, and you only need 3 out of 5 questions to be right to get the full percent, and you have 2 attempts. So pretty handy. They're not too bad, and they also again give you kind of a feel of how the quiz is, like the test is going to be for like the 8% test that you have. And then you also have like at-home labs. These can be very tedious, I will not lie to you. However, there are a lot of resources out there that kind of give a guideline and kind of help like speed up the process a little bit, but they are pretty hands-on. Like I learned a lot in like our quizzes, and they're really fun. Like I don't know if this was in like 1080 or the next part, which we'll talk about once we get into the next semester, but like a lot of them are like I remember having to create like an LED circuit. Like there's a lot of intricate things, and you're gonna get like a little physics kit. And yeah, so those will, I think, are due like every other week as well. And you have basically like a quiz that's on like CourseLink, and you'll fill it out. Honestly, for me, some would take like 2 hours, some would take 8. So make sure you allot a good enough time or like a day to complete it, because they can be very tedious and confusing, but you'll get it along. Now, I believe, Madison, you took Physics 1300. I did 1080, but how about you briefly talk about 1300?
Okay, so in my high school, we were unable to have physics because we just didn't have enough students that wanted to take it. I didn't take grade 11 or grade 12, but I thought Physics 1300 going in was daunting because I hadn't had a background in physics since like grade 10 science, which was COVID and basically nothing. But we had a professor. He was good at making you feel comfortable in physics. He was good at explaining things. People are like, with him, but it was not horrible. It could be a lot worse if you didn't take physics before. I just felt like this course, out of all of the courses I took in first year, was something that you always had to be on top of your stuff because the quizzes were bi-weekly. And it was like, okay, you have your online textbook. I don't know if they're going to change it, but our textbook was online, and they had practice questions, and then you had to fill out those practice questions, and you would do those like every week. You had to fill out and there was also these things called study guides, and basically each study guide was per chapter of what you had, and they would want you to use those as practice. So those were very, very, if not kind of similar to what you would see on the actual quizzes themselves. But I did find those very, very helpful. And I'm somebody who likes to do the same question like a couple times till I understand it effectively. So those really did help. Now, for the labs, those were like probably some of the most fun memories I've had of first year, because when I did them with my friends. I don't know if you're supposed to or not, but there were so many fun memories of like we had to go and measure how much something dropped down a flight of stairs. And that was the first noise complaint I got of university, was in a staircase doing a physics assignment. Now, kind of ironic, but there was a lot of things that it was just a fun experience to have. And also forgot to mention that with these labs, you go to our bookstore, which is where you buy a majority of your university stuff. You buy a physics lab kit, and in it will have everything you need for this first semester of physics and the semester after that. So it's not something that you're going to have to constantly rebuy to do. And if you take 1300, for the next physics I took, which was 1080, I used the same textbook. I didn't need to buy another textbook. So the good thing about physics is that you only need one textbook for the 2 semesters. And what else is there to say? I think that's majority of it. But, oh yes, and the quizzes. Please stay. I did not stay for my first quiz. I regret it because my mark was kind of low. But I remember sitting there. There was one time I sat there and I told the TA, I'm like, I know this went bad. He's like, no, we'll see what we can do. And he pulled marks out of things like nothing. I was like, thank God I passed, because each quiz, not to intimidate you, is worth 10 marks. And it is make or break, because I've known people who get really low and that's their lowest mark of the quizzes, or really high. And for the final of physics, it was cumulative, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't horrible. There was about 40 questions ish, and it covered majority of the content. It was pretty fair. It was all multiple choice, whereas when you're doing the actual physics quizzes, you're doing like written calculations, you're doing step-by-step processes. They want to see every single step. They don't want you to jump from the beginning to the end. They want to know how you got from there to there. And I think that's the biggest thing in that course, is understanding your process without taking shortcuts that would make your answer look like, where did you get this from? But I think that's basically it for my side of physics.
Yeah. For 1080, again, pretty similar with like the quizzes and stuff. I personally found the final probably like I found it more challenging than the quizzes, only because it was culminating and you're given kind of like a reference or like a formula sheet with all the formulas. But I remember like a lot of questions were integrating two different like chapters, and then I got confused as like which formulas to use. So personally, I found like the final, having all the formulas use at your hands essentially, was pretty difficult for me, and I think that's where like the majority of like my like grade did drop from. But other than that, I did like, looking back, like there were so many moments where like I would just like laugh because like the labs were so funny, and like even when you would do questions, like I remember there was a question where I had to find the kilogram like weight of a person, and I got like 8.6 kilograms. I'm like, well, obviously that's not right. Like a lot of the times, like you, as long as you just have fun with it, I feel like don't take it like physics too seriously. And like I found, yes, it was very difficult, but at least there was moments that were like fun to kind of balance it out, I would say.
Yeah, and that reference sheet will be your best friend. Make sure you understand every formula on that reference sheet, because it will be useful for both semesters. You just keep adding onto that formula sheet.
Yeah.
I'd recommend just going through every formula, knowing what each variable means, and going from there.
Completely agree. Yeah, that's what I did as well. Like I downloaded the formula sheet on my like iPad, and I just wrote what each one meant, so that when I knew the test, like if it was looking for the centripetal force or whatever it may be, then I knew like what equation I was using, and it helped kind of like slim down like which equation I was using essentially. So yeah, I think that's pretty much to sum up my physics. Alright, next is your last course, which is going to be the course that you can choose. So essentially there is it is a liberal education elective. So when you go to WebAdvisor and you go to like select all your courses, there's basically like a list of all the different electives you can take. It is pretty a long and lengthy list, so there's a lot of options to choose from. Now for me, I took like introduction to musicianship my first year, and I thought that, okay, I'm not the greatest writer, there won't be a lot of writing, but if you're not musically inclined, I would not recommend taking that course. They had me singing, and then I also I had to tell like there's 2 pitches, and I had to tell how many pitches were apart, and I like don't have perfect pitch. I'm not Charlie Puth, so I found it tricky. Again, if you're musically talented, I would recommend it. Like it was still, if I was musically talented, I think I would have done well. But yeah, I did find that course pretty difficult. I also did take an FRHD course, so I took human development, but there's like a lot of humanity courses that are like a good amount of writing, but they are like online. So I would recommend taking an online course in your first year, just because it does balance it out. Your course is going to be like pretty jam-packed, because you're going to have like your 3-hour lab from chemistry, you're going to have your lab, like 2-hour lab from like your biology course. It is a pretty hefty semester, so having an online course does help kind of balance it out a bit. But yeah, I would recommend any FRHD courses or like intro language classes. Like they have Italian, I think like Spanish, like they have a lot of like cool languages if you're interested in taking up on a language. But that's kind of what I would take something fun, that like, or like something that interests you. I had a friend that took geography online, that was like, she said was pretty easy, so that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, don't do what I did. So basically when you pick your liberal education elective, there's a page. There's one section that will say liberal education electives, and there's one page that will say science electives. Now, I'm not that smart. Well, obviously I am, but I'm still here. But I took Intro to Computing SIS 1200. Now, that was a science elective. So currently behind on liberal education electives, but it's okay, because I can tell you guys that course brought up my average from first year. So if you do want to take that course in the future, take it. It is the most easy course in the world. I did barely any work. Final was online, non-proctored. The assignments were pretty straightforward with Excel. But I will speak on my friends. They did take different liberal educational electives. I have no friends who have taken creative writing, and they just thought it was a lot of writing assignments, but they didn't find the content too hard. I had a friend who took Intro to Spanish, and she was practicing, and I'd laugh, but she got a good mark in that too. And then I had a friend that did mythology. I forgot the classics, I believe it is, and that was pretty decent. So it's just whatever interests you the most. It's like, think of it as like your English. You just want to take something that you will want to learn about your first year, and you think that you can handle. So I suggest doing research online, looking at the course outlines, finding what people did in the past, because it's all based on your strengths, not what we're telling you here, basically.
Yeah, like keep in mind you're going to have like biology, chemistry, physics, calculus, which are all very pretty content heavy courses. So having something that kind of like breaks it up is also like not only balances out, but it's kind of like refreshing to work on something that's like a little bit different. So yeah, that's kind of what I would recommend. Try something different, try something new, see what interests you. Maybe something that you would like start a minor in the future, like whatever you would enjoy, but like pick a class that you would think is like fun and enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
All right, so I think that is concluding of our first semester. So now let's get into the second one. A lot of them are pretty similar, but it should be pretty straightforward.
Okay, to start off our second semester of first year, we're going to start off with Chem 1050, which is basically your general chemistry 2. Now, basically, this course is like really similar to Chem 1040 as we took so long to talk about earlier. Same layout of the wet labs, the dry labs, same layout of the lecture styles, bi-weekly labs, same midterm and finals. They just switched the weight of your midterms around because I believe in first semester, it was 15% and then 20, whereas this one was 20 and then 15 for your online midterm. But basically, it's just really similar. This one is a lot more math-based, I found. We had a lot of like kinematics, combustion equations, a lot of like things that you would find in just general chemistry. It's just a continuation of whatever you didn't cover that you did in high school, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree. And personally, even though Chem 1040 is known as Killer Chem, I actually found Chem 1050 a little bit harder. I think like reason there were a lot more like long calculations that I found tricky. I did find the lab section of 1050 was better than 1040, but I think that just comes with like experience and getting to know like how the assessments are graded and stuff. But I did find the content of the midterms and the finals were a little bit more intricate. There were a lot more calculations. So like personally, I found it actually a little bit harder. But other than that, it's pretty much like the exact same layout. Expect the same pace of things. I think the only difference is like you kind of get to like learn the pace of things and you like figure out how fast like our courses kind of run. Because then again, think it is now like only a 4-month semester, whereas like school you would have like I think around 5 months ish. So that's one thing to keep in mind is like second year you kind of learn to adapt to the pace of things. So I think that's what kind of makes general chemistry a little bit easier, but in terms of the content, I personally found it a little bit harder.
I found both hard. I don't have a good opinion on that.
Yeah. But that's pretty much all in general chemistry too.
Yeah.
All right, so we're moving on into our next course, which is Introduction to Molecular and Cellular Biology. So this is BIOL, so Biology 1090. Now this course is pretty much split right in half. So there's 2 professors, there's 1 midterm, 1 final, not culminating. So it's good that you can kind of focus on each prof individually. Personally, I love the genetics part of this class. So for us, this was the first half. It's possible sometimes they do a little flip around where they'll do the second half first and the first half second. But I really liked the genetics part of it, where we did like pedigrees and all that fun stuff. However, the final is very content heavy. It is more the cellular biology thing, like part of it. But the good thing is this course does set you up for a few classes in second year, which we'll speak about in our other episodes. But essentially, it'll kind of prepare you for
like our genetics course, which is like MBG 2040, and then also prepare you for MCB, which is the cellular biology portion. So that's one thing to note, is make sure you do not fall behind in this class. Cramming it will not be fun, as especially the final is a lot of memorization. There also are seminar participation marks, and also like basically you just read the essay instructions carefully, and it's pretty easy to get full marks for them. Again, it also is like you can lose silly marks if you're not fully paying attention, but all the seminars are pretty much participation based. I don't know if your thoughts on Bio 1090. I thought like the midterm was pretty fair. I thought the final was definitely very difficult, but what are your thoughts?
Honestly, that course is like like she said, is the introduction to MCB and MBG. Personally, I forgot everything after I left this class, but this class was good and interesting because it touches onto the math side of things, which is your genetics, your pedigrees, learning things that will help you for future courses. Like for us, well, this will be in our second year episode, but there we have 2 MBG courses that both utilize pedigrees, that both utilize the math that you need to know. Whereas also with the seminar, you have an essay that is peer, like you do it with a group. No, sorry, group, another partner.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I was randomly assigned a person.
I was randomly assigned as well.
I was like, I don't know this person. I don't want them to ruin my mark because I heard negative things from the first semester. So I did like the body and made the person do the intro and conclusion because I'm like, I want this mark so bad. Make sure you don't do it last minute because that assignment requires you to deeply understand the content and condense it because they don't want you to reiterate a paper to you. They want you to say it in your own words, which I found was a little difficult, but it's not that hard of a course as long as you stay on top of the content and make sure you pay attention because this will prepare you for future courses such as MBG and MCB. The midterm for me was a blur, I can't lie. It wasn't horrible, or the final. The final was like, went either way. The only memory I really have from this class was when our professor told the entire class to shut up. That was basically kind of it. That was just it.
Yeah, I think like in general, it's just like a good stepping stone for what you're going to learn in future years. And like, it's also just like, in general, I found that it was still enjoyable to learn and interesting. And it was probably like, it was a good balance from like our other heavy courses. Obviously, you see in first semester, we're taking like calculus and physics and chemistry and like a bio course. Whereas like this one, we're kind of jumping in. We're not taking calculus anymore. So we're having more biology, agriculture based courses. So you'll find, personally, I did like it as a whole. I liked the second semester better than the first semester. And I think this helped kind of contribute to it.
Yeah.
All right. That's all for
Okay, not first. Now you have your first like actual introduction to animal biology course, which is our AGR 1350, which is agriculture, basically 1350. This is animal production systems and industries for dairy, poultry, and egg. Now, coming to this major, I actually thought we'd be learning like cats and dogs. This really taught me really quickly how eggy you can get with your dairy, poultry, and eggs. Now, this one was probably like my favorite class so far of university. This one had a lot of interactive trips where we got to go to different dairy farms. We got to see we got to see a feed mill. And even the professors, you have 2 different professors in this class. One professor who you'll probably see around, he's been teaching this since time, is Professor Bedekratz. He teaches the egg section. Love that man. And then the second half of the course will be your dairy section. Now, we had a different professor when we did it. She was very lovely. Love that woman. Taught it pretty well. But the content is not hard. It teaches you what you need to know for building a foundation and understanding dairy and poultry, as I didn't have a background coming from this. I didn't know nothing compared to my peers because a lot of them had that agricultural background. So it's just an introduction to everything you need to know going forward I don't know how you felt about that.
Yeah, I would say it's probably my favorite class to date. We went on so many field trips, like to a lot of like dairy facilities. We went to like Alora. I believe we went to another one I can't remember the name of.
It was like in Timbuktu, but they
Yeah.
had a chocolate milk factory.
Yeah,
It was so
the
fun.
chocolate milk was great. It was honestly just really cool seeing like the dairy systems and like how much work it takes to like just produce our everyday milk that we have in our fridges, you know? So I found it really cool. And I also love the poultry section. I do have some chickens at home, so I did have a little bit of experience. But what I really found was like the reproductive system of like female chickens and like seeing like all the egg follicles and like how like the egg shell is created. So I found that super interesting. And then we also have labs. So our labs are essentially like some of the labs you're going on a field trip, and then other ones like there was like cool like little dissections that we did, so we got to see like the like actual inside anatomy of a lot of animals. And it also like touches a little bit on physiology, which you're going to learn about in future courses, but it kind of it teaches you basic agriculture standpoint, so like how to produce like these everyday resources, and then it also teaches you about the anatomy of these animals, right? So I personally like love poultry and bovine, so I was incredibly interested in this course. And I also found the midterms and finals were both pretty fair. Again, they are not culminating, so you're going to have one midterm that is on like poultry, and then one and the final for us was on like bovine, but it could be flip-flop. Like sometimes they do it reverse, but it is not culminating, so you get to focus actually like on one like species at a time, which I found was like I was able to actually retain the information, and it's one of the courses that I actually like kind of stuck with me, and I still like remember a lot of the stuff. So yeah, overall loved this course, and I was like super excited to take the second part, which is in your second year.
Yeah, with this course, I feel like it cements you wanting to stay in your major because it is so interactive. It could, like the field trips especially connect a lot of what you learn in lecture to what you are going to see in your labs. Like a lot of university courses, you can feel that a lot of it will be content based. But I found with this course, we at least got to see what we're getting into. We got to have unique experiences where you could go home and tell your family that you went to a dairy farm. Like,
Yeah, like just taking pictures with some cows and then showing my family. They're like, no way! Like it's so cool that you get to kind of be more hands on, especially coming like came from a little bit of a rural area, but like obviously I hadn't been to a dairy or a beef farm or anything like that. So it was just a cool experience. And it also opens you up to a lot of different like jobs that are available too. Like I know obviously a lot of us are set on vet school, but there's also so many agriculture like sectors that at least like I would recommend just dive into, see if it's something you're interested in. And I think this course is a great way at doing that.
yeah, and even like we had the feed mill trip. Now you say, oh, feed mill does not sound interesting in a course that is based on animals. But I remember going up there with my little hard hat, my little protective vest, and my headset ready to be like, ooh, this is nice, this is nice. And it was really fun. So this course will give you that joy in first year and create long lasting memories.
Agreed. And if you're a person who loves to know like the actual like understanding of how things work and like the little details that go into creating like a simple product that's created so frequently, like you'll greatly enjoy this course.
And it teaches you a lot about all of the industries. Like aside from the anatomy and physiology, there's a lot of different industry perspectives, especially like the quota system or how many cows per farm that we have in Canada. A little random details that you wouldn't necessarily think to search for your major, but they just end up teaching you, and you just have random fun facts until you graduate, basically.
Agreed. I think that pretty much sums up that course. Loved it. Alrighty, so moving on to physics. So dependent on what you take in first semester will lead you to what you take in second semester. So if you took physics 1300 in first semester, that's like the fundamental one, which you would take physics 1300 if you have not taken physics in grade 12. Then you're going to take physics 1080, which is physics for life sciences 1. If you take physics, like if you took physics 1080 in first semester because you've taken physics in grade 12, then you're going to take physics 1070. Don't ask me why it goes down from 1080 to 1070. It just does. But this is physics for life sciences 2. And this is generally the same layout, like I said again. So there's going to be 5 quizzes, each worth 8%. There's going to be pre-tests, which will be due like the beginning of the week before the quiz. And then there's going to be the final, usually around 35-40%, around that range. And then you're also going to have the labs. So the good thing is your lab kit in 1070 is also the same lab kit you use for 1080 and 1300. So there's no need to purchase another lab kit. I found 1070 pretty similar to 1080, and I actually found that 1070 was easier, mainly because I got used to how fast the pace this course was. So I will not lie to you, final was still pretty rough for me. I do find that like I'm good at like kind of narrowing in on certain physics concepts during the quizzes, but once kind of like all the equations and all the variables are at play for every question, I found that like time was something that I struggled with on the final, and then also again figuring out what formula I'm using. So I found for me the final was rough. What I would do is like when you're studying for the final, don't just focus on concept by concept, try to like mix and match, and like if you can kind of jumble all of like the study guides into one and just take random questions from random study guides, this way you can actually like detect which section of the equations you're using. I think that would be really helpful, and it's something that I wish I did. But yeah, overall I did find the content to be easier in 1070. Now I believe Madison, she took 1300 and then did 1080. So what are your opinions on 1080?
Honestly, 1080, like Alyssa said earlier, was not that difficult. It starts off with basically intro 1300. Everything you learned in 1300, you're doing in what, I believe 2 weeks. And then you're starting brand new content where you're going into the actual, like, what physics could be applied to. So your blood vessels, a bunch of different random things that you wouldn't have thought of before. I found it to be, like, difficult only because I hadn't seen that content. But because I did 1300, I found it to be fine. It's just getting yourself used to doing those types of questions, practicing new ways that you weren't like doing before. And I told my friends like, oh, I kind of miss physics. They looked at me like I was crazy, but it's just how you studied for them and the pre-tests and the study guides and all the effort that you put into that course made it seem worth it once you did like your quizzes and then you get high marks, or when you're talking to your TAs and they just go, amazing.
Yeah,
love that.
best feeling.
Continuing. But it's just really interesting, the content I found. At least the labs were pretty interesting, fun, and interactive. We had a different professor going from first semester and second semester. Like sometimes the same guy will teach both physics, but even then we had a different one, and he was pretty great. He went over everything pretty fine. It wasn't anything crazy that you should be scared of. If you did pretty okay in your first physics, you're going to be fine in your second physics. It's like the exact same like speed, the exact same but like pacing of content. Like as long as, like I said, as long as you know your formula sheet inside and out, you do all of your study guides and inside and out, know everything, practice, 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 practice. Because once that final hits, like you're going to be like, okay, I try to do to study in 2 days before the final. I forgot what force, like a couple forces were, and then I saw them on the exam and I went, oh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so don't take this course lightly. Make sure you understand what you are actually doing before you go into it, because it will matter in the end.
Yeah, I like to think of like physics classes are like as if you're solving a puzzle and you have to kind of like try to figure out that puzzle. Sometimes it can be really frustrating if you can't find that missing piece, but like when you do, it's like, oh, finally, you know? So that's kind of one thing I would say. For me, taking 1080 and 1070, I actually found that like those two courses were pretty completely different. Like what 1070, there was like a lot of like brand new concepts that you didn't really need much of 1080 from. You still needed the thinking process of solving a question, but it was like completely new formulas. Like it was kind of like a clean slate almost. So it wasn't as much of building upon your pre-existing like calculations. There were a lot of new topics that we discussed, which I liked. But yeah, I would say both courses are doable. Some people find like it really depends on your learning style. Like some people find physics a lot more challenging than like the chemistries, and some people find chemistry easier. It really depends on like how you like grasp like concepts and ideas and what your learning style is. But yeah, I would say like it's pretty manageable.
It is a roller coaster, but it's like in a sadistic way. It's like really good when you get that answer because you're like, yes, I could do this, and then it's just like it just feels good once you actually understand it, because it could take you like what, an hour to solve one problem. but it's an interesting course. I do recommend trying your best, trying to understand, and just enjoying the process.
Yes, completely agreed.
Okay, so for your last course that you can pick, congrats, you finally reached here. Hopefully you've stayed this long to listen to us. It's another liberal education elective. Now, again, I'm not the smartest person. I took another science credit because I want to start my zoology minor. So I took Bio 1070. We'll not be going into that. But I can recommend you a liberal education elective that I did take in second year, which was Introduction to Psychology, which is Psych 1000. So basically what it is just like a bunch of, I took it also distance education, so online, which is great if you don't want to go to a physical class. Now this class is competitive because you're taking it with a bunch of first years. So if you don't get it, I apologize, but please do try to take it in the future. I highly recommend. Basically what it is you have the textbook, you have your weekly readings. If you stay on top of them, you're golden because there are, I believe, 2 midterms and then the final, which was pretty straightforward. You could easily, as long as you understood what you were reading, understood key figures of like who are the main people in psychology, understanding like empathy, understanding basic things, and applying yourself to these questions, like I truly recommend them because the logic that I learned in psychology helps me prepare for other English-based courses that we take, like our welfare class that we take in second year. That really did help me understanding like reading, narrowing down to a simple concept, and learning how to apply that to different scenarios. So I do highly recommend taking Intro to Psychology.
Yeah, and like for me, that second semester, I took an FERHD course, which was like human development, and it was like tedious at times because there was like little like ways of life assignments that you would do, and like you have to make sure like you follow the rubric to a T because you can like easily get marks off. But all in all, like those courses that are online, again, just help like balance out your workload a little bit, and then also like because you're on campus constantly running around to labs and lectures, it does help having like an online course to kind of break away from that and like sit in your like dorm room or sit at your house and just like work away on it. So yeah, that's what I would say for liberal educations. Take something that's like fun and interest you. All right, and I think that wraps up our first year course selection breakdown. Remember, it's okay to feel overwhelmed and to explore different interests and to take time to find your rhythm within this program. The most important part is showing up, staying curious, and asking for help when you need it. And you've taken the first big step. Celebrate it and keep growing. Congratulations and welcome to the University of Guelph. You're going to love it.
You guys.
Bye!
Double whistle.